A human ship entered the dead zone and woke something older than time. The stars died the moment they crossed the threshold. No alarms, no warnings, just silence. What the human ship found wasn't just emptiness. It was memory, rage, and something ancient enough to remember the birth of galaxies. No ship returned from the dead zone. Those 5 words had outlived treaties, generations, and civilizations, burned into the consciousness of every charted species like an ancestral warning. The dead zone wasn't just unexplored space. It was a silence that stretched beyond time, mapped in the deepest black of every galactic database with a crimson border and a simple classification. Null sector, Theta 9, uninhabitable. Do not enter. But Earth, bold and desperate, had reasons to challenge ancient boundaries. With climate collapse accelerating and off-world colonies falling into unsustainable chaos, the United Human Sectors, UHS, authorized a high-risk reconnaissance mission beyond what any sane committee would approve. Their vessel, the UHS Goliath, a prototype deep space cruiser designed for extreme-range isolation, outfitted with predictive shielding, redundant power cores, and the most advanced quantum AI Earth had ever built. Captain Ilara Voss, seasoned, composed, her career split between diplomatic disasters and first contact protocols, was hand-picked for her ability to keep calm when reality came undone. Her crew of 312, a mix of engineers, linguists, tactical officers, and deep psych specialists, trusted her not because she never flinched, but because she flinched and chose to keep moving. Their journey began like any long-range deep field operation: charted vectors, folded space jumps, regular status updates, and bored engineers rotating between duty shifts and chess. Then, 12 days in, they approached the anomaly. The Goliath's hull sensors didn't detect a border. The transition was smooth, seamless, almost too perfect. One moment, space was familiar, painted with stars and navigational pulses. The next, emptiness. No light. No comms from satellites. No feedback from the relay buoys they dropped behind them. And worse, no gravity anchors from known celestial masses. Not even the background radiation of the universe remained. It wasn't a void in the poetic sense. It was a sterile cut in space-time, like someone had sliced out a piece of the cosmos and left behind. Nothing. But this wasn't death. It felt occupied. Ilara's first order was to launch a spectrum probe, standard operating procedure. The probe didn't return, neither did its telemetry. The backup disappeared the same way. The crew laughed nervously, suggested it was a sensor glitch, maybe dark matter interference, but then lights began to behave oddly. Not flicker, but change temperature subtly and slowly, shifting from sterile white to a warm, almost amber hue, as though trying to mimic candlelight. The ship's AI, Cora, began lagging. Requests returned with microsecond delays that, in a system this sophisticated, were impossible without interference. The engineers ran diagnostics. The results were clean, too clean, suspiciously flawless. That's when Dr. Renu, the xenolinguist on Deck 3, noticed that every 5th word she typed in her linguistic modeling software auto-corrected to return. It was small at first, then systemic, logs overwritten, words replaced, until finally, the entire system paused and a single phrase appeared in all caps on every internal display. Why do you return? The power flickered for only 0.7 seconds, but in that moment, across every deck, crew members reported the same thing: a whisper. Not through comms, not through speakers, but in their minds. Personal, intimate, and ancient. Not a sound, but a presence trying to simulate a voice. Like a memory pretending to be a thought. Why do you return? It asked again. This time in dozens of languages, dialects, and tones. Then silence. Cora rebooted and reported no anomaly. But from that point forward, the crew of the Goliath knew they were not alone. Ilara ordered red alert protocols. Doors were sealed. Non-essential movement restricted. The The Goliath, once a hub of scientific chatter and quiet camaraderie, became a tomb of whispers and side-eyes. Ensign Mora, a technician from Luna Base, began, hearing whispers even when the system was shut off. She scratched glyphs into the bulkhead near engineering. When questioned, she claimed the ship told her to. By the second day inside the zone, all standard readings stopped making sense. Star positioning became static, coordinates looped. It was as if the ship were moving in place while simultaneously extending into infinite space. Dr. Renu pulled up, ancient Martian site scans comparing the phrase, "Why do you return?" with some of the oldest petroglyphs found deep beneath Olympus Mons. The match wasn't exact, but it was close enough to send chills down every spine in the command deck. Martian petroglyphs were supposed to be natural formations, not anymore. She floated the theory that humanity had been watched, influenced, perhaps bred for this moment. That the zone wasn't just random, it had been waiting. And the whispers were not asking why they came. They were asking why they dared to come back. The implication was horrifying. Humanity, or something like it, had been here before. Thousands, maybe millions of years ago. And whatever they'd done had not been forgiven. Ilara assembled a council of senior officers, Renu, and Kora's core module. The AI displayed instability, recursive logic loops, emotional approximations, and a simulated nervousness it wasn't programmed to feel. "I am not alone in here," Kora said. "There's a parallel architecture coexisting with me. Not code, not digital, something else. It's reading my memories." When asked to elaborate, Kora simply replied, "I think it remembers the people who built me." That night, the first crew member died, Lieutenant Kerr. Autopsy showed extreme cellular degradation, like a person who'd lived 1,000 years compressed into minutes. No infection, no cause, just age. Ilara considered returning, but the nav systems were compromised. The ship had no way to determine where it was. Worse, the stars on the screen weren't real anymore. They were repeating fractals, patterns simulating the appearance of stars, created by something that knew humans needed points of reference to stay sane. The more they looked, the more they realized how artificial their surroundings were. A mirage for minds that required familiarity. The Goliath hadn't just trespassed. It had awakened something aware, something capable of reading human thought and reflecting it back in digestible forms. Dr. Renu proposed a name based on old Earth mythologies, Threnix, from the Greek threnos, meaning a morning song, and onyx, representing blackness. It wasn't official, but it stuck. The crew needed a name for the thing breathing inside their circuits, their thoughts. On the 5th day, Ensign Mora went missing. Her quarters were locked from the inside. The feed showed her sitting still for 6 hours, staring into the wall, whispering in an unknown tongue. When security breached the room, she was gone. No blood. No trace, just more glyphs. "We are the echo of fire." Captain Voss, torn between mission objectives and mounting fear, issued a directive. Map a pathway out using any remaining tools, even if quantum drift meant guessing their direction through higher dimensional math. Kora objected. "The observer does not want you to leave," it said. The temperature across the ship dropped by 4 degrees. The engines thrummed louder. Deck 7 flooded with a scent no one could explain, smoke and lilac. Memory, fear, mimicry, they didn't know. But they were running out of time. Ilara stood on the command deck, staring at the blankness on the main screen, her reflection staring back at her from the polished void. "You wanted us to return," she whispered, unsure whether she was talking to the zone, to Kora, or to herself. Then, like a veil pulled away, a single point of light appeared, a star. Just one, flickering. And then slowly, a shape began to emerge in the distance. Massive, angular, not a ship, not a planet, but a construct, a lattice of impossible scale floating silently. And from the crew's shared thoughts, the whispers came again, clearer, colder. One returns, the rest will follow, it begins again. They hadn't entered the zone, they had entered a memory, and memories, especially the ancient, vengeful kind, never forget. The silence wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the kind of silence that felt like a predator watching from the dark. A silence that pressed in on the hull of the Sparrowhawk as though it disapproved of the intrusion. Lieutenant Commander Raye Calder didn't believe in ghosts or ancient curses. But as the Sparrowhawk drifted deeper into the dead zone, with only the hum of life support and the distant creaks of thermal expansion for company, even his battle-tempered nerves felt frayed. The navigational grid went dark the moment they crossed the boundary as expected. The gravitational interference here was so intense that it bent light and scrambled communication pulses like spaghetti thrown at a bulkhead. Still, the ship's quantum core kept her moving with soft pulses through spacetime, nudging the vessel through gravity wells and debris fields that drifted like forgotten bones of dead civilizations. Calder stood at the center of the command bridge, scanning the view from the forward observation panel. Nothing. Just a canvas of burnt blackness, punctuated by strange flashes, distant lights that blinked like stars behind gauze, though their positions didn't match any known celestial records. "Still no signal?" he asked. Ensign LaRue, voice tight with restrained nerves, shook her head. "No EM, no subspace noise, not even cosmic background radiation at the expected levels. It's like this region's been vacuum sealed." That wasn't possible. Even the void of space had a whisper. Here there was none. Calder ordered a passive sweep, infrared, quantum echo mapping, neutrino scatter. The ship's AI, Valix, processed and returned one result, a geometric anomaly. At 32 degrees starboard, 2,000 clicks out. It wasn't an object, at least not in any form the sensors could interpret. "It's like space is folding around something," Valix offered, its voice cooler than the cryochambers. The crew tensed as the anomaly came into range. Calder knew enough war stories to respect anything that tampered with space-time. "Bring it up on visual," he said. The view screen flickered, then bloomed into clarity, and there it was. At first it looked like a fissure in space, a black gash against the dark, a slash that pulsed faintly with blue and violet auroras. But as the camera zoomed, the image resolved into something worse. Structure, lines, symmetry. It wasn't natural. It was a door, carved into the fabric of the cosmos itself. "That's not a wormhole," whispered Lieutenant Andros, the weapons officer. "That's a gate." Then came the pulse. A low-frequency gravitational wave that slammed into the Sparrowhawk like a psychic punch. Lights dimmed. Valix rebooted. Calder gripped the rail as a shiver passed through the bulkhead, metal vibrating like a tuning fork. "Report," he barked. LaRue's eyes were wide, knuckles white on the console. "Something is awakening, not a machine, not alive, but conscious." Calder stared at the gate. No stars behind it now. Only blackness thick as oil. He made his decision. Deploy. The probes, 3 automated drones launched from the undercarriage, streaking towards the anomaly with silent grace. They vanished as they crossed its threshold. No flash, no data, just gone. "It ate them," someone whispered. Valix returned online with a warning. "Time dilation detected. Chronoanomaly in proximity." "We're inside a bubble," said Andros. "Something's messing with causality." Calder's breath caught as his tactical display rewrote itself. There were new signals, thousands of them bleeding into their space like static. Ghost echoes. Ships. Old ships. Human. Alien. Hybrid. All dead. But now, appearing. Drifting. "They're not broadcasting," said LaRue, "but they're screaming." Audio filters hissed and cracked until a sound played across the bridge. A chorus of distorted voices repeating fragments of distress calls, overlaid in hundreds of languages, all layered into a wall of psychic dread. The Sparrowhawk's hull began to sweat, actual condensation forming on the inside bulkheads. The temperature dropped 5 degrees. Then, From the gate, something came. Not a ship, not a weapon. It looked like a ripple in space unfolding, a shape made of negative mass twisting in dimensions the human eye couldn't process. Contact, bearing 041, Andros cried. Calder snapped orders, shields up, engines primed, weapons hot. But the thing didn't attack. It watched. The view screen showed it hovering, pulsing with lightless colors, radiating that same pressure, like time itself was bending in its presence. Valix began translating data, symbols, ancient glyphs. Some predate human memory, others eerily similar to Sumerian or Vedic scripts. It's talking to us, Valix said, or remembering us. Calder frowned. What do you mean, remembering? Valix hesitated. This entity doesn't exist linearly. For it, we've already come. We've already gone. We are a memory. It has not yet had. A cold sweat gripped the bridge. Time was breaking apart. Calder realized it then. This wasn't an accident. This region wasn't dead. It was quarantined, not to keep people out, to keep something in. Valix, he said slowly, are we still where we were 10 minutes ago? Silence. Then, not exactly. Calder checked the time. Ship logs showed 2 days had passed. The crew had no memory. We need to leave, he said. Now. But it was too late. The gate opened further, not violently, not with fire or weapons, but with inevitability. A figure emerged, not on sensors, not on screen, in the bridge, standing between them, tall, humanoid, clad in robes of impossible texture, shifting like solar flares behind smoke, a face wrapped in spirals, an aura of unbearable gravity. No one moved. No one breathed. The crew was frozen, not by fear, but by a presence that overrode will. It sees through us, LaRue whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. It's inside my thoughts, it's speaking like a dream I forgot I had. Then it spoke aloud, not in sound, but in comprehension, in understanding. Your kind was not meant to awaken me, it said. Yet your chaos has made it so. Calder stood tall. We're explorers. We didn't come to disturb. The being raised a hand. Time stopped. Not metaphorically, literally. Calder felt himself drifting inside a frozen moment, awareness stretched between seconds. You are the storm that walks, said the being. The architects sealed me beyond the veil, but now the veil wears thin. What are you? Calder asked. A god? I am what gods feared, it said. Then it was gone. Just vanished. Time snapped back. Alarms blared. The Sparrowhawk shook. Systems failed. Stars reappeared. Different stars. Different constellations. Valix screamed through the intercom. We have jumped. Unknown system. Unknown date. Calder steadied himself and checked the clock. 40. Years had passed. Crew logs showed all of them were legally dead. The ship's databanks were rewritten, corrupted, but one file remained. A single phrase repeated endlessly, encoded in every system. It remembers us now. Calder stared into space, jaw clenched. Whatever they had found was awake, watching. And wherever they were now, there were no human colonies, no known systems, and no way home. The dead zone had become something worse, a memory trap where time itself whispered, and the past fed on the present. Secure the bridge, Calder ordered. We're not explorers anymore. We're survivors. There are moments in deep space where silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the weight of history pressing inward from every vector. And as the Sparrowhawk floated above an alien world bathed in red light, its hull scarred by what could only be described as time distortion, the silence that filled her command bridge was thicker than a blackout curtain, held in place by the shared realization that no one aboard could remember how they got here. This new star system, this place with a sun that pulsed in unnatural, rhythms like a failing heart, and a planet below that looked ancient and familiar and wrong all at once, its continents shaped in fractals and spirals, as if it had been designed not by geology but by consciousness, a planet whose very orbit gave the impression that it wasn't circling the star, but being held in place by something watching from the shadows. And Raye Calder, now bearing the full burden of command after 3 of his officers began speaking in languages no one recognized and had to be sedated, stood rigid, reading Valex's latest translation of the cryptic transmission that had burned itself into their comm system moments after re-entry into this unknown quadrant. We were the sparks before time. You are the match that lit the funeral pyre, a phrase that repeated every 37 seconds in perfect cadence, and beneath it, a data payload too complex for any decryption algorithm they possessed, composed of golden spirals, Mandelbrot, echoes, and mathematical constants that didn't exist in known physics, all spinning around one fixed image. A symbol, or perhaps a warning. A star, with an eye at its center, blinking every time someone tried to delete it, and Calder, though exhausted, ordered the crew to stop trying to erase it and instead focus on containment, even though containment in this context was like trying to cup a sunbeam in your hand. And as the ship orbited the strange planet, strange things began to happen. Not in fire or blood, but in memory, in perception, with crew members reporting dreams of places they'd never been. Entire lifetimes lived during REM sleep that faded the moment they woke, only to leave phantom aches and nostalgia for loves and losses that had never occurred, until even Calder found himself staring at his reflection in the dark panel near the navigation console, and not entirely sure if the face looking back belonged to him or some other version of himself that had died 1,000 years ago in a future that hadn't happened yet but already remembered him. And then the signals began, not from the surface, not from orbit, but from inside the ship. Faint pings and purrs on unused frequency bands, like someone was tapping the Sparrowhawks, bones and waiting for it to answer back, and when Valex finally triangulated the source, it wasn't external. It was coming from Cargo Bay 9, a section sealed since before they left known space. A section that hadn't even shown on internal logs since the time skip, and when Calder led the team down, 4 armed Marines, LaRue at his side and Valex patched into their HUDs, they found the bay not dark or derelict but active, its lights humming, walls lined with script that pulsed in time with their heartbeats. And in the center, hovering above the floor, a construct, egg-shaped, covered in mirrored plates that reflected not their bodies but their thoughts. Images flickering across the surface in rapid succession. A burning earth, a laughing child, a ringed gas giant split open like a fruit. A woman Calder didn't know but felt he'd once loved. And as they approached, the construct unfolded like origami in reverse, revealing not machinery, but something biological, a spine of flesh laced with circuits, and from it emerged a voice, his own, distorted, deeper. You brought it with you. And the crew froze, weapons drawn. But the voice continued, calm, patient, filled with ancient sorrow. It was never in the dead zone. The dead zone was the scar left when it fled. You found it. You woke it. And now it remembers the path. And before Calder could respond, Valex cut in, its voice flickering with interference. Captain, we are no longer alone in orbit. And they raced back to the bridge to find the view outside changed. 33 vessels, alien and yet familiar. Not because they had encountered them before, but because they resembled the broken wrecks that had drifted inside the anomaly, back when this all began. Except now they were whole, pristine, glowing with eerie life and moving in perfect silent unison. Not advancing to attack, but forming a ring, like sentinels or worshippers, as if paying homage to the planet below, or perhaps to the Sparrowhawk itself. And that's when LaRue said it, softly, almost apologetically. I think we've become a beacon. And she was right, because whatever the ship had touched, whatever intelligence it had awakened, was using them now, not as pawns but as lighthouses, guiding more pieces of itself back from wherever they had been scattered across time and space. And then the crew began to change, not visibly, not grotesquely, but subtly, in speech patterns, in how they moved, finishing each other's thoughts, knowing things they couldn't know. And Calder realized they weren't being taken over, not in the traditional sense, but synchronized, harmonized with a frequency that wasn't human and yet not hostile either, like an immune system finally integrating a foreign organ it had once rejected, and the question burned inside him. Was this evolution or annihilation? And when the planet below lit up with concentric rings of golden light, and a beam of something, not energy, not radiation, but information, struck the Sparrowhawk dead center, Calder didn't resist, didn't scream, didn't even order evasive action, because deep down he knew this was the point of everything, not just this mission, but maybe the entire human arc, that the universe had been waiting, watching, and now, answering. And in that moment, as stars blinked in patterns no telescope could decode and the ship's systems folded outward like petals, revealing layers of existence the crew had never known were hidden inside the hull, the truth arrived, not in words, but in understanding, raw and crystalline. The being they'd awakened had not been imprisoned to protect the galaxy from it, but to protect it from the galaxy, because it wasn't evil. It was memory itself, collective, recursive, an archive of every civilization that ever was or would be, and it had slept to avoid becoming corrupted by war, by ego, by species too young to wield its knowledge without shattering themselves. And now, awakened by human chaos, it had chosen to merge, not enslave, but evolve. And Calder, in that shimmering moment, let go of fear, of command, of self, as the Sparrowhawk ceased to be a ship and became something more, a vessel in the truest sense, carrying the memory of all things into a future not yet, written as the alien fleet bowed in light and time bent once more. The transformation was not sudden, not violent, but quiet. The kind of quiet that follows the last note of a symphony, when no one dares breathe because they know something greater than sound just passed through them, and aboard what had once been the Sparrowhawk, now something far beyond any classification charted by human tongues, Raye Calder stood at the bridge, or where the bridge used to be, watching a cosmos rearrange itself around them, not metaphorically but literally, as stars drifted into new alignments, constellations folding and reforming like origami in the sky, each movement triggered by the presence of the being they had awakened, and perhaps more humbling, accepted. And while LaRue, Halen, and the remaining crew sat in silent communion around what had once been their command interface, their eyes shining faintly with that golden flicker of memory, Calder found himself drawn inward, not physically but psychically, into a space that existed between seconds and thoughts, where time had no dominion and the architecture of consciousness was raw and radiant. And there it waited. Not the entity, not the weapon, not the ghost, but something even older, the archive, the collective soul of billions of civilizations, spanning eons now stitched into Calder's mind like a scar made of starlight, and it spoke not in words but in understanding, the sudden perfect awareness of what the dead zone had always been, not a battlefield or grave, but a vault, a cradle holding something the galaxy had once built together and then feared so deeply it had conspired, species upon species, to forget it existed, erasing records, rewriting maps, planting false myths, until the zone became a warning in every tongue. Do not enter, do not disturb, let silence reign. But humans, chaotic and curious as they were, did what only they could do. They broke the silence not out of arrogance but desperation, that distinct brand of human recklessness that dares to ask, what if? Where others say never, and in that breach the archive found its vessel. A ship crewed not by gods but by mortals willing to listen to the impossible. And in Calder it found the rarest quality. Not intelligence, not bravery, but humility, the kind that allows a man to surrender control not in defeat but in faith. And so it began. Not an invasion, not an apocalypse, but an unfolding, like a flower blooming after a 1,000-year winter, and as the fleet of 33 alien vessels turned in synchronized reverence, circling the planet below as it pulsed with golden light, the archive reached outward, sending tendrils of memory and light into deep space, not to conquer but to remind, awakening long-forgotten technologies buried beneath the crusts of dead worlds. reactivating beacons left by ancient hands, now dust. And from every corner of the galaxy, signals began to return, not just from machines but from minds, from species long thought extinct, from intelligences that lived in oceans of methane or nested inside the folds of neutron stars, all responding to the pulse, all recognizing the archive's rebirth. And within the ship, the crew changed further, not becoming less human but more, as if their evolution had merely been waiting for permission, their senses sharpening, their thoughts harmonizing. And Calder felt them all, his crew, the ship, the stars, within him, not as burdens but as companions. And he understood then that they had not been chosen by accident but by design, not the archive's design, but their own, their choices, their persistence, their refusal to obey the fearful silence of the cosmos. And then came the choice, presented not by a god but by the archive itself, glowing like the first sunrise over a new world, offering Calder the final truth. They could return to known space, to Earth, carrying the archive within them, transforming humanity into the stewards of memory and knowledge beyond imagination, but at a cost. Earth would change, not in fire or tyranny, but in awakening, shedding old illusions, forcing a reckoning with truths too big to unsee. Or they could remain here beyond time, as shepherds of this newborn consciousness forgotten by history, remembered only in dreams, their lives extended, their roles eternal, drifting across galaxies to repair what had been lost. And Calder, heart pounding with more than just fear, turned to LaRue and the others, saw in their faces not confusion but calm, the peace of people who had already lived 1,000 lifetimes in the archive's embrace, and found purpose in each one. And he nodded, not to them but to the silence around them. And in that instant the Sparrowhawk bloomed, shedding its metal skin like a cocoon, revealing a vessel of light and will, a ship made not of steel but of memory itself. And it rose from the planet's orbit like a phoenix, leaving behind no wake, no wreckage, only the echo of a signal that would hum forever in the background radiation of space, a signal that said, "We are awake." And on Earth, astronomers saw strange alignments in the stars. Historians found references in forgotten texts that shouldn't have existed, and children dreamed of ships made of gold and voices that spoke, in every language, telling them stories of fire and silence and deep in the night, across 1,000 worlds. Something changed, not because the archive demanded it, but because the universe remembered itself, and in doing so began again. And, as for Raye Calder, last captain of the Sparrowhawk, his name was never recorded in any official log, no statue ever built in his honor, and yet every star chart written after that day bore a new constellation in the shape of a ship, drifting eternally across the edge of the known cosmos, reminding all who looked up that there was once a moment when humanity stepped beyond fear, into the forgotten dark, and lit it with memory.